You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
We were talking yesterday about what happens if there's too much rain. Is it possible to pray that the rain will stop? And Choni, the circle maker, absolutely, he refuses. He says, look, not unless there's a flood that washes away an enormous rock, am I going to pray for less rain? But sometimes the rain falls when we're in the middle of the fast. And the third chapter of the Mishnah actually ends on this kind of hopeful note. You know, what happens if, the rain starts falling suddenly? They're fasting and rain falls. Everything is good. If the rain falls before sunrise, they don't complete the fast. If it falls after sunrise, they complete it. And we've already learned that the bit of the fast which is sort of ubiquitous, which is indivisible, is the day fast. Some of the fasts only last during the day. So maybe the view is, look, I think Rashi has this view that the serious bit of the fast doesn't start until sunrise. But Rabbi Eliezer is going to disagree. And by the way, according to the Rambam, we're going to follow Rabbi Eliezer. So very unusually, the halacha is actually going to follow Rabbi Eliezer in this case. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kodem lachatzot lo yashlimu. If it rains before noon, they don't complete the fast. And it feels as if the big meal in those days was noon. In other words, you wouldn't really start fasting until noontime. I don't think these guys had. I think their economics were a bit different from ours. They didn't have a big breakfast. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Kodem lachatzot lo yashlimu. If it rains before noon, they don't complete the fast. Achar chatzot yashlimu. After noon, they do complete it. It once happened, they decreed a fast in Lod. We know about Lod. I think Rabbi Yehoshua used to live around Lod. I think Rabbi Akiva used to live around Lod. Anyway, we're going to find out that Rabbi Tarfon used to live around Lod. This is clearly a rabbinic area, and it's close to Yavne. Why not? So they decreed a fast in Lod. And rain fell before noon. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, we should not fast. According to the first source in the Mishnah, we should. Amar lahim Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon says to them, go out and eat and drink and have a holiday. And they went and they ate and they drank and they made a holiday. And they came back at dusk and they read the great Hallel. And not just the Rambam tells us that the halacha follows Rabbi Eliezer, but seeing that Rabbi Tarfon is backed up by a story, seeing that Rabbi Eliezer is backed up by a story about Rabbi Tarfon, and that is the end of the discussion. That seems to be definitive in terms of the way the Mishnah operates. And the Mishnah then goes on to say, Ve'ezahu Hallel HaGadol. What is the great Hallel? It's really interesting that, we have the great Hallel in the Haggadah, and we saw it actually in the Mishnah Pesachim. The Mishnah Pesachim knows what the great Hallel is. It's Hodu Lashem Kitov. But the Mishnah here gives it a slightly different description. It starts from the second pasuk. Hodu lelohei Elohim ki li'olam chasto. Hodu la'adonei ha'adonim ki li'olam chasto. Praise the God of gods, for his love is eternal. Praise the Lord of lords, for his love is eternal. It starts off picking up the great Hallel just one pasuk after the pasuk we know, maybe because they don't want to write God's name, perhaps, in the manuscript of the Mishnah in case it should get destroyed. And sure enough, the Rambam Maimonides in his commentary comes and gives the verse that we're familiar with. Hallel hagadol hu me hodu lashem kitov ad shir hamalot. The Rambam says The great Hallel is from the first verse we know, praise the Lord for he's good, and it goes till the Song of Ascents, Shir HaMalot, which is the first verse of the next psalm. Uma shechayavim shelo karu Hallel hagadol ad sheachlu veshatu. And the reason they didn't recite the great Hallel until they ate and drank is because the general principle is that we don't recite great Hallel unless we are benefesh seviyah, with a satiated nefesh. I'm not sure the Rambam is talking about a soul here. He might be talking about a body. Nefesh can refer to body or life, but somehow, unless we're satiated, we're not in a position to really recite Hallel HaGadol. And I guess we're talking about a fast time, so maybe people have not been eating very much. The keres melea, and a full stomach. The halacha Rabbi Eliezer, and the halacha is according to Rabbi Eliezer. And that is the conclusion of the third chapter of Taanit. So we began with the slow process of building up the fasts. We've ended with rain falling before the fast has gone out. And now, in the fourth chapter, we're going to segue, we're going to drift into different kinds of prayer that are associated with fast days. And we'll see the connection very fast. There are 3 occasions during the year, 3 times during the year, when the priests lift up their hands 4 times during the day. And when the Mishnah talks about the priests lifting up their hands, they mean lifting up the hands and blessing the people. We're talking about Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing of the people. And what are these 4 times? They're at Shacharit, at Musaf, at Mincha, and at Ne'ilah. Now, and this might be a little unfamiliar to us in the diaspora, because in the diaspora, the priests don't lift up their hands except on Chagim. But in the land of Israel, the basic halacha is as we do in the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, the priests lift up their hands whenever there is a tefillah. So it will be at Shacharit and Musaf. For example, on a regular day, when there is, as long as there is Musaf. What about Mincha? Well, we have a tradition. I mean, it's more than a tradition, it's halacha. The Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, is taught next door to the law of the Nazir, who doesn't drink. And there is a halacha that a priest cannot serve when he's drunk. We've learned already that priests will not drink alcohol when they're on a mishmar, when they're on the group that are going to serve in the temple. So we would not normally lift up our hands at mincha because we might have drunk for lunch. But of course, on a fast day, there's no question of the priests being intoxicated because they're fasting. So at mincha, we can lift up the priest can lift up their hands, and the same at Ne'ilah. The same at Ne'ilah. And the Mishnah goes on to explain, what are these days? What are these days when the priests lift up their hands 4 times, these 3 occasions? Bataniot, uva ma'amadot, uva yom haKippurim. On fast days, on ma'amadot, and on Yom Kippur. And the Rambam explains in Hilchot Tefillah that the sages did institute a prayer after Mincha, close to the sunset, on a fast day only, in order to increase Kadei lahosif tchina uvakasha, to increase supplication and pleading, mipnei ha'ta'anit. And we don't have this prayer now, or we have it, but only on Yom Kippur. But it seems as if in the time of the Mishnah, this prayer, this Ne'ilah prayer, that today we only have on Yom Kippur, this would exist on any fast day. And the Jerusalem Talmud asks the question, and this question goes to the heart of the Ne'ilah prayer. Ad eimatai hi Ne'ilah? Until when is Ne'ilah? Until what time can we recite it? Rabbanan, the Caesarea Amrin, It Palgun, Rav, the Rabbi Yochanan. And the rabbis of Caesarea said that Rav and Rabbi Yochanan disagreed. This is a disagreement also between Babylonia and Eretz Yisrael. Rav is in Babylon. And Rav said Rav said, when the gates of heaven are locked. Ne'ilah means locking. So Rav says the locking refers to the gates of heaven. Rabbi Yochanan says, B'inat sharei heichal. Rabbi Yochanan says, when the gates of the temple are locked. Maybe, of course, Rabbi Yochanan in the land of Israel is more sensitive to being close to the temple. Rav out in Bavel maybe is more sensitive to, the heavens are essentially, they're ubiquitous. They're even in Bavel. And then Rabbi Yudin Antodiah said that the Mishnah supports Rabbi Yochanan because the Mishnah actually refers to Ne'ilah, to the locking of the gates. And we can't say that the locking of the gates, we can't say the gates are locked while it's still daytime. It has to be right close to sunset, as if to say the gates of heaven don't lock easily. And that's why we say, the priest, that's why we have the additional prayer right at this time of day, because the gates of heaven are not locked easily. Now, the Mishnah then goes on to ask, well, what are these ma'amadot? We said there are 3 times during the year when we have a Ne'ilah prayer, and we've said they are on fast days, on Yom Kippur, so clearly on fast days that are not on Yom Kippur, and on ma'amadot. And we don't really understand these ma'amadot, or we have touched upon them in the Mishnah of Megillah, but if we hadn't remembered the Mishnah of Megillah, we wouldn't remember the ma'amadot. So the Mishnah is now going to explain them. Eilu hen ha'ma'amadot. What are these ma'amadot? And it explains, Lefi shenemar tzav et bnei Yisrael ve'amarta lehem et korbani lachmi le'ishai reach nochachi tishmeru li b'moado. It's a verse from Bamidbar. Command the people of Israel and say to them, my offering, my bread for my sacrifice, a sweet savor to me, you shall guard, tishmeru. You have to guard the offerings to offer to me in its season. Tishmeru l'hakriv li b'moado. You have to guard this to offer to me in its season. And the Mishnah asks, Vechi heich korbano shel adam karev. How can a person's offering be offered and he's not present? He's not present to guard it. Doesn't work. You have to be there when your offering is offered. There's something personal. There's a direct connection between the person giving the offering and the offering itself. And he's not present. Hu eino omed al gabav. He's not standing next to it, the Mishnah says. Ela shekinu hanavim arishonim. So how did it work? The former prophets, the first prophets, instituted 24 mishmarot. A mishmar is a word for guard, basically. So the prophets instituted 24 mishmarot. And for each mishmar, I'll call mishmar umishmar haya amud b'Yerushalayim. For each mishmar, there was an amud. An amud is a kind of post or a group. There was an amud in Jerusalem. Shel Kohanim v'shel Kolim v'shel Leviim v'shel Yisraelim. There was a group in Jerusalem of priests, Levites, and Israelites. So this group was part of the, if you like, the 24 mishmarot. These 24 guards, by the way, are going to offer the sacrifices one in every 24 weeks. So they're going to take turns. And there's a group of priests, Levites, and Israelites. So when the time for the mishmar comes, the priests and the Leviim, they go to Jerusalem because they have to work, right? They have to offer the sacrifices. This is how we get personal connection to the sacrifices. The Yisrael shebe'oto mishmar, and the Israelites of that mishmar, the ones who don't have to work in the temple, mitkansim la'arehem vekorim ma'aseh v'reshit. The Israelites of that mishmar, they assemble in their cities and they read the story of creation. So these are the ma'amadot. These are the Israelites connected to the sacrifices. While the temple is operating on their behalf in Jerusalem, they are reading Maaseh Bereshit. They're reading the original creation of the world, as if to say, look, the world was created in order to serve God. And we will discover in the next Mishnah that while they're doing this, they actually fast. They fast on and off for practically the whole week.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.